happening there. And even with the electronic ones, you've seen where the drivers will try to disconnect and reboot, but with these tracking systems, the way they're built today, there's no way around operating correctly with the EODs. I love the EODs, by the way.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, especially the disconnect piece. There was a story that came out in the news, I want to say it was probably about a month and a half ago or so, that there was a company that was actually telling their vehicle operators to unplug the electronic logging device. And if you're not familiar with an electronic logging device, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about to the people listening. This is how the hours of service are tracked for vehicle operators. And there's certain restrictions on guidelines on how many hours they can drive in a day and how many hours they can operate and when they need to take a break and so on. But on this news story in particular, they were talking about that the vehicle operators were encouraged to unplug the device if they thought they were going to go over on their total hours or if they needed to take a break. And I just thought it was so crazy that you would have a company that would tell people to do that, not realizing that even if you unplug the device, it's still tracking the vehicle. And it's interesting on how a lot of the vehicle operators at first had the misconception that it stopped tracking them. So when you started dealing with that particular issue, how were you able to alleviate the problem without it sounding like a corrective measure, but how were you able to say, okay, we know that we have a system failure, meaning that inside of our organization, and this needs to be corrected, because you're not going to get rid of a driver because that's not going to correct the problem, because it's normally let me rephrase that, there's normally multiple vehicle operators that will talk about doing something to that extent. So how do you put the fail safes in place for that issue not to continue going on?
It's tough. It's a tough thing, but I mean, unfortunately, it has to get to the point to where you make a few examples and keep plugging from there.
When you did that, so I know that you say examples, and that, I mean, it could go one way or the other depending on exactly how you're referencing it. But was there anything that you were able to put in place that said, hey, this will alleviate the problem? Or was there anything that you could track on the background where it stated, hey, you had somebody who actually disconnected the unit and you were able to see it from a remote kind of version? Or what exactly did you end up doing?
Well, in most cases, the same operator would be in that vehicle in most cases, but not all. But the thing of it is, once they log into it, as you know, they're assigned to that particular unit. So it wasn't hard to figure out who was unplugging or disconnecting it at any given time. You just had to be on top of your log situation and know, so you can correct that problem within a certain time frame.
So a lot of the discussions that I have with people, we normally talk about the different styles of safety that's out there. We talk about two different styles in particular, and we call one behavior-based safety, and that's more along the lines of, talking about the 300 incidents, 29 in 1. That's kind of a very popular theme. And then the other one is called human organizational performance. If you had to take a look at both of those aspects of safety, which one let me rephrase that. Which one would you say that you would lean towards more?
The 329 and 1, because that's actual behaviors in a vehicle leading to 29 minor events to 1 fatality. That would stick out to me.
Okay, so that's the one that sticks out to you. Now, have you seen a particular item that caused you to say, hey, that's the correct method for what you believe?
Yes, through a previous company of training, yes.
Okay. And was there anything that caused you to believe that based on the training that you had seen?
Yes, the breakdown of the 329 and just the reality of it all.
Now, when I have people on, I don't say that one's correct and one's incorrect, but I had a gentleman on by the name of Dr. Todd Conklin a few weeks ago, and he referenced that the things that would cause an ankle sprain are not the same things that killed you. And I was like, that's such an interesting concept on how he worded it. And I'm not saying that, 329 and 1 is incorrect. Everybody has to have what works for them. But I just thought it was interesting on how his perspective was in that particular regard. And that human organizational performance, that a lot of people reference now, or what they call safety differently, is such a different view on how safety is perceived, and how they say in the long run that not all accidents are preventable, which is totally different than most behavior-based safety information that you receive. But also it references that you need to be working within the environment knowing that there's going to be a failure, but what can you do to set up that failure not to be so excessive, or it could be a graceful failure. And I thought it was such an interesting concept. And the first time that I had heard it, I started scratching my head going, it's kind of what I believe, but at the same time, I wasn't aware that somebody else had already had those kind of thoughts at the same time. It's just been very interesting listening to both. And I really think, and this is just my personal opinion, not that you asked for it, but I'm sharing it with you anyways, is that it's kind of a mixture of both. And it's what can you tie in to both to make sure that really ties in? Because I sat with somebody recently and they told me that 95% of all accidents are preventable. And as they told me that, it kind of drove me crazy to some extent, because I looked at it and I went, if 95% of all accidents are preventable, at some point you're telling me that the worker is coming into the facility and they're intentionally being injured. So do you kind of see that all accidents are preventable?
It's kind of interesting that you put it that way. I guess it's a foundation that's out there that's pretty much set that safety is freedom from risk.
Okay. And believe me, and when I'm telling you, I look at it as that everybody has to have their own opinion and what works best for them and their organization, because that plays a huge factor into it. And believe me, I'm not trying to have anybody on for a debate. I just want people's opinions and what works in the particular environments that they're in. And I will tell you what might work for a transportation company will not be the same thing that will work for a hospital or for a theme park. I'll say theme park because, of course, being based out of Orlando. But those are the things that I always look at, and I always love to hear what are the different aspects that different people use inside of their companies. So as you've been through your safety career, if you don't mind me asking, what do you think has been the biggest change that you've been able to bring within the industry?
The biggest change, again, through training and learning and all these classes that I've been able to take, is that people look at it in a different light now. At first, safety wasn't labeled for everyone. Now, it's pretty much the focus from the top to the bottom, from what I've seen.
And when have you seen that trend started to take place? When, can you pinpoint a time frame on when it started to do what I would say the shift?
For me, probably in the last 3 to 5 years.
And do you see that as a positive thing now that it's kind of more broad spread?
Yes, it's a positive thing, because again, the safety guy was always the bad guy, but now things are transitioning to the fact that everybody is a part of safety.
And that for sure is a big change, because you're absolutely right. I remember being in organizations where the safety person was considered the bad person, and everybody would normally prep or try to stick something out in particular if you had a safety person coming in, especially an unannounced visit. For one bad thing would stick out, for they wouldn't focus on other things. So it's funny that you mentioned that. So as we're about to wrap up here, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience?
Safety is number one.
That's a great way to look at it. Definitely is. William Fisher, I do appreciate you being here on Safety FM. And until next time, be safe.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.
Safety FM, changing safety cultures one broadcast and one podcast at a time.